My name is Ethan Rowe, 33, former firefighter, current burnout. After 6 years running into burning buildings, I thought I'd be used to silence. But silence is different when it's cold, when it breathes around you. When the nightmares got bad enough, I took a transfer to something quieter, something lonely. That's how I ended up in Mount Rainier National Park, assigned to Outpost Ridge 13, a post so remote that it barely existed on the park maps. Keller, my supervisor, told me it was a quiet assignment. That was all I wanted, quiet. The drive there took 8 hours. The road narrowed to a dirt track barely wide enough for my truck, and the trees leaned in so close they looked like ribs closing around me. It was almost dark when I stopped for gas at a rusted-out station. The clerk, a man with skin like parchment, stared at my uniform. "Ridge 13, he said. His voice cracked like dry wood. I nodded. He hesitated, then muttered, "Stay inside after dark. The forest doesn't like being watched." I laughed. He didn't. By the time I reached the ridge, fog was rolling down from the mountains, thick and slow. The cabin sat at the edge of a valley, surrounded by black pines that swallowed what little light the sky had left. The radio tower beside it leaned slightly, its red beacon blinking weakly through the mist. Ranger Keller met me at the door. He was older than I expected, gray hair, bloodshot eyes, hands that wouldn't stay still. He spoke in that hollow tone people use when they've been alone too long. "You'll get used to the quiet," he said, handing me a keyring. "Just don't listen too hard." He paused, staring out the window at the dark treeline. "If you hear it calling your name," he added softly, "don't look out the window." I waited for the joke, but he didn't smile. He just left, his headlights vanishing down the road until the fog swallowed them whole. Inside, the cabin was small, a desk, a cot, an old radio humming with static. The logbook sat open, the last entry dated 3 months ago. The page ended mid-sentence. Outside, the forest groaned under the wind. Then the wind stopped. For a moment, everything went still. No birds, no crickets, not even the creak of trees. And then, from somewhere deep in the dark, came a single, deliberate knock on the cabin wall. Once. Slow. Heavy. Like something out there was just making sure I knew I wasn't alone. The morning after the knock, the forest looked calm, deceptively so. The air hung heavy with fog, the kind that turned sound into a whisper and distance into a lie. I brewed instant coffee and flipped through the old logbook again. The pages were filled with neat handwriting until they weren't. The last entries were jagged, smeared, desperate. The final page simply read, "It knows when you look." That's when I noticed a sealed envelope pinned under the logbook's cover. Yellowed paper, edges curled, sealed with red wax. Across the front, in shaky block letters, "Rules for surviving night shift, Ridge 13." I laughed at first. It felt like some ranger's idea of dark humor. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside were 9 rules, each one typed in an old font that smelled faintly of smoke. 1. Lock both doors before 10:45 p.m. If someone knocks after that, ignore it. 2. If the wind stops completely, turn off your lights and stay still. 3. If you hear footsteps circling the cabin, don't check the windows. 4. Don't answer the radio unless the caller uses your full name. 5. Never walk beyond the treeline after dusk. The trail loops back wrong. 6. If you see a lantern glow between the pines, count to 10 and close your eyes. 7. Don't speak to anyone who looks like Keller after midnight. 8. When the forest hums, hum back. It means it's passing through. 9. If you wake up outside, don't run. The cabin will find you again. I read them twice, grinning at how absurd they sounded. The cabin will find you again. What was this, a ghost story written by Boy Scouts? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the paper was warm, like it had just been written. When I stepped outside, the wind hit me with that sharp, pine and iron scent unique to the deep woods. Everything was perfectly still, too still. Even the birds didn't seem eager to move. I radioed Keller, figuring I'd tease him about the rule list. It took a while before he answered. His voice crackled through static, low and dry. "You found the envelope," he said. Not a question. Yeah, I replied. Cute initiation thing. You always mess with the rookies like this. There was a long pause. Then, softly, almost a whisper. Follow them, Ethan. Everyone. That's all that's left keeping this place quiet. The radio clicked dead. I stood there for a long time, staring at the treeline. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked. Not from wind, but from weight. Heavy weight. That night, I locked both doors just before 10:45, feeling ridiculous for humoring the list. The wind outside howled for a few minutes, then died altogether. Completely silent. Not even the hum of the generator. Not the tick of the clock. Just nothing. I reached for the light switch and froze when I remembered rule number 2. If the wind stops completely, turn off your lights and stay still. I stood there in that motionless quiet, the world around me holding its breath. Seconds stretched. Then I heard something, faint, wet footsteps in snow, circling the cabin. One slow lap, then another. My heart hammered so loud it sounded like breathing. And when the footsteps stopped just outside the back wall, right behind where I stood, I realized I was holding my breath too. It stayed there for a long time. Long enough for my reflection in the window to tremble. Then, a whisper against the glass. Ethan, open the door. I didn't. Not that time. The next few nights were uneventful. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I try to treat the rules like folklore, a weird tradition passed down through generations of board rangers. During the day, Ridge 13 almost looked peaceful. The evergreens stood like giants, dusted with frost, and the air had that crisp stillness that makes you feel like the last person on Earth. I spent my mornings logging wildlife movement and weather conditions, then brewed weak instant coffee while staring out over the valley. At night, I'd sit by the radio, half listening to static, half hoping Keller would call to explain that all of this was some twisted initiation prank. He didn't. By the 4th night, I'd memorized the rules, though I didn't believe a word of them. Still, I followed them. Maybe out of superstition. Maybe out of fear I wouldn't admit to myself. At 12:03 a.m., I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps outside, crunching lightly through the frost, circling the cabin. I froze. My first thought was a bear, but bears didn't walk in perfect circles. The sound stopped. Then it started again. Slow, careful, moving just beyond the reach of the porch light. I found myself inching toward the window before the words came back to me. Rule number 3. If you hear footsteps circling the cabin, don't check the windows. So I stood there, hands trembling, listening. The steps stopped right outside the front door. Silence stretched so long I thought maybe I imagined it. Then something dragged, a soft scrape against the wood, like nails or fingertips. My breath fogged the air. I didn't move. At 12:47, the wind picked up again, and the noise was gone. When I finally dared to look outside, there were no footprints in the snow. None. Not even mine from earlier. The next night, it was colder. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes the walls creak like they're breathing. Around 1:30 a.m., the forest began to hum. It was faint at first, low and deep, vibrating through the ground, through the floorboards. Not wind, not machinery. A sound alive, patient. It reminded me of something Keller had said on the radio before I arrived. When the forest sings, it's not for you. I whispered, "What the hell?" But the noise grew louder. Out of instinct, or stupidity, I hummed back. Just a quiet, uncertain note. Instantly, the humming stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than before, pressing against my chest like deep water. I didn't move for the rest of the night. When I woke the next morning, my throat was sore, as if I'd been humming in my sleep. By the 6th night, I had stopped pretending I wasn't afraid. The rules had become a rhythm to live by. Turn off lights, check the clock, listen for the wind. At 2 a.m., the radio crackled. The static burst, then cleared. "Ethan," a voice said. Calm. Familiar. It was Keller. "Ethan, I need your help. Step outside for a second." I froze. He was supposed to be off shift, asleep 20 miles away at base camp. The radio hissed again. "You can bring the flashlight. I just need your help." I didn't answer. Then came the sound, faint, rhythmic knocking on the porch railing. Not hard enough to be a threat. Just waiting. Rule number 4. Don't answer the radio unless the caller uses your full name. I waited. The static shifted, and the voice came again, this time closer, quieter. Ethan Rowe, it said. That sent a chill through me, so deep my hands went numb. I grabbed a flashlight, turned it on, and pointed it toward the window, but stopped halfway. I couldn't bring myself to look outside. Instead, I leaned just far enough to glance through the peephole. Keller was standing there. He wore his ranger coat and hat, but his skin looked pale, almost gray. Frost clung to his beard, and his smile was too wide, frozen in place. His eyes were white, not blind white, glowing white, like moonlight trapped under ice. He tilted his head slowly, as if he could see me through the wood. Then, without moving his lips, I heard his voice through the radio again. Ethan, let me in. You don't want to be alone out here. I dropped the flashlight. When I looked again, the peephole was empty. But out in the distance, between the trees, a faint lantern light swayed, moving deeper into the forest. And for the first time, I started to wonder if Ridge 13 was watching me. The 5th night began like the rest, cold, silent, and stretched thin between fear and exhaustion. My nerves were raw from lack of sleep. Every creak of the wood, every whisper of wind through the cracks made me flinch. I had just finished logging temperatures when the radio hissed to life. At first, it was only static. Then, beneath it, came a small voice. A child's voice. Please, it's so cold. I'm lost. I froze mid-breath, staring at the radio. The signal wavered, broken and distant, but the sound of crying was unmistakable. Can anyone hear me? Please help. I felt my chest tighten. The rules immediately came to mind. The one about not answering the radio unless the caller used my full name. But this wasn't a ranger. This wasn't Keller. It was a kid. And every instinct I'd ever had as a firefighter, as a rescuer, screamed at me to move. I pressed the transmitter button. This is Ranger Ethan Rowe, Ridge 13. Identify your location. No response. Just soft sobbing. Then, clearer this time. I see your light. Please, help me. I looked out the window. A faint glow flickered between the pines, low to the ground, like someone carrying a lantern. Rule number 6. If you see a lantern glow between the pines, count to 10 and close your eyes. I didn't count. I didn't close my eyes. I grabbed my coat, the flashlight, and the emergency beacon. Within seconds, I was outside, boots crunching through snow, heart hammering against the rules I'd sworn to follow. The air was still, too still. The forest loomed dark and endless around me, shadows stacked like walls. I followed the faint light deeper into the trees, calling out, "Hey, keep talking. I'm coming." The voice came again, weaker now, trembling. "Hurry, it's getting colder." The snow deepened quickly. It reached my ankles, then my knees. My flashlight beam barely pierced the fog drifting low across the ground. Every tree looked the same, straight, tall, and unervingly close together. I tried marking them with my glove, but when I looked back, the marks were gone. "Where are you?" I shouted. "Keep calling." Silence. Then I saw it. A lantern, hanging from a branch up ahead, swaying gently. I approached, breath clouding in front of me. The glass glowed faintly gold, and inside, the light didn't flicker naturally. It pulsed like a heartbeat. When I stepped closer, I saw something that froze me where I stood. Faces, pressed against the inner glass, faint, distorted, their mouths open in soundless screams. Eyes rolling, shifting like they were trying to see out. I stumbled back, tripping over a root, and the forest whispered, "Ethan." The voice came from every direction, soft, layered, 100 different tones overlapping, all using my name. "Ethan, you found us." My flashlight sputtered, flickered, then died. Panic took over. I turned to run, but the forest had changed. The trail behind me was gone, swallowed by a wall of identical trees. Everywhere I looked, trunks stretched in unnatural patterns, curving subtly inward, forming a slow spiral. My breath came out ragged. I tried to follow my footprints, but they didn't lead back. They led deeper. Somewhere behind me, the child's voice returned, but now it was wrong. Lower. Older. Like something trying to remember what a child sounded like. Don't leave me, Ethan. I sprinted, half blind, my boots slipping through the snow. The whispering followed, overlapping murmurs weaving through the trees. For a brief second, I thought I saw Keller standing between the pines again, lantern in hand. But when the light moved, his shadow bent in the wrong direction. By the time I reached the cabin, my lungs were burning, and the horizon had started to pale. Dawn! I slammed the door behind me, locked it, and slid to the floor, every muscle trembling. For a while, all I could hear was my heartbeat and the faint ticking of the wall clock. When I finally caught my breath, I noticed the logbook on the desk was open to a fresh page. The handwriting wasn't mine. Across the top, in shaky black ink, it read, "Rule number 5 broken. The trail remembers." Below that, smeared in what looked like dirt, or something darker, was a single fingerprint. It wasn't mine either. And from somewhere deep in the woods, faint and rhythmic, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, tracing a perfect circle around the cabin. The next morning, I couldn't shake what I'd seen. The faces in the lantern, the voice pretending to be a child, the forest whispering my name. I told myself I was hallucinating, sleep-deprived, maybe even hypothermic from the hours outside. But then I saw it again, the logbook open on the desk, the page I didn't write. The words hadn't faded. Rule number 5 broken. The trail remembers. I decided to look for answers. Keller's old quarters were in the shed behind the cabin, a windowless wooden shack lined with frost. Inside, I found shelves of old Ranger gear, a broken typewriter, and a single metal locker, its paint blistered from rust. The lock had already been snapped off. Inside were 2 things, a service revolver wrapped in cloth and a leather-bound journal, the cover cracked and flaking with age. On the front, stamped in faded gold letters, Project Hollifield, 1982. I carried it inside and started reading. The handwriting was small, deliberate, and oddly calm, as if the writer had seen too much to still feel fear. The early entries were ordinary. Notes about a federal geological survey, a special assignment, near Mount Rainier's northern border, Ridge 13. The team had been sent to investigate unusual seismic activity, even though there hadn't been any earthquakes. They described the forest as responsive. Instruments picked up rhythmic vibrations beneath the soil, not random, but patterned. One entry said the trees swayed out of sync with the wind, as if something beneath them was breathing. The deeper I read, the more the words began to spiral. The tone changed. The readings don't match any natural movement. We tried drilling for samples. The drill broke. The ground is hollow, but the void isn't empty. Sound carries differently here. When you speak, there's a delay before the echo comes back, like something below is repeating it. Our text says the forest moves every 11 hours. The pattern matches a heartbeat. Then came the final section, the one labeled containment protocol. The hollow isn't a place. It's a boundary, a fracture where something on the other side presses against ours. Rules were established to stabilize the fold, behavioral triggers that prevent it from expanding. The wind, the lights, the voices, they're symptoms. When the rules are broken, the fold thins. The last entry was shorter, scrawled, hurried, as if the writer knew he didn't have long. 2 rangers missing. Keller says it's starting again. We're not guarding the park. We're guarding the hole in it. If you're reading this, you're already part of the rotation. When the forest calls your name, don't look. It's just trying to remember your face. The signature at the bottom wasn't Keller's. It was someone named M. Rowe. My last name. I stared at it for a long time. My stomach turned cold. The lantern outside flickered faintly through the window, like it was breathing in time with my pulse. I flipped to the final page. It wasn't handwriting anymore. It looked burned into the paper. A single line, seared dark brown by heat. The rules don't protect us. They protect everything else from getting out. I sat there for what felt like hours, the words ringing in my head, the forest whispering softly beyond the walls. And then, faintly, through the static hum of the radio, Keller's voice broke through, trembling, strained, and far away. Ethan, I told you not to go into the woods. Once it knows your name, it doesn't forget. That was when I noticed the frost forming on the inside of the cabin window, curling into shapes that looked like fingerprints. And in the distance, the trees were moving again. Not from the wind, but from something underneath them, something pushing to the surface. 3:33 a.m. The forest stopped breathing. No wind, no sound, not even the low groan of trees shifting in the cold. The stillness felt heavy, like the air had turned into water. I remembered rule number 2. If the wind stops completely, turn off your lights and stay still. But the fluorescent bulb above me flickered once, then twice, then 3 times. Rule number 8. The humming began again, faint at first, like a vibration inside my skull. It wasn't coming from the forest this time. It was coming from the walls. I turned off the light. The cabin fell into darkness. My breath fogged the air in front of me, trembling in the thin beam of my flashlight. Then, something whispered, "No, Ethan, it's us." The voice wasn't outside. It was everywhere. The wooden walls began to bow inward, groaning as if the forest itself were inhaling. Shadows slid across the windows, tall and human-shaped, faces pale and featureless except for the mouths. Dozens of them, pressed against the glass, moving out of sync. I stumbled backward, hand finding the rifle by the door. The radio burst alive, static first, then 2 voices overlapping. One was Keller's, the other was mine. "Ethan, it's opening. You let it remember you. Stay still, Ethan. Don't breathe. Don't." Static swallowed the rest. A crack split the floorboards under my feet. Cold air hissed upward, smelling of soil and rot. The hum outside deepened, vibrating through the cabin like a pulse. Then, a hand, black and glistening, like it had been carved from tree bark, slipped through the gap between the boards. Fingers too long, knotted with veins of ice. I fired. The gunshot shattered the window, but the thing didn't flinch. Instead, it pressed closer, forcing its way through, dragging a shape behind it. A face. My face. Its eyes were mine, but the pupils were white, empty. The other Ethan smiled. "You broke the 5th rule," it whispered. "Now the trail remembers." I backed into the corner, rifle shaking, my reflection in the window warping into dozens of copies, all staring back at me. The hum rose into a chorus, the forest singing, hundreds of voices overlapping, blending with my own until I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. Then, silence again. The last thing I remember was the other me stepping forward, pressing a hand against my chest and whispering, "Don't worry, the cabin will find you again." And then everything, the forest, the cabin, even the sound of my breath, collapsed inward into black. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through the blinds. The smell of coffee, fresh, hot, drifted through the air. I was sitting at a desk in the Ranger headquarters, everything impossibly normal. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it all. The humming, the forest, the other me. Then the door creaked open. A young ranger, maybe 23, stood there, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Rowe," he asked, "Ridge 13's open again. They said you're cleared to return tonight." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, return?" He frowned, confused. "You've been assigned there for weeks, sir. Are you feeling okay?" He set a folder on the desk and left before I could answer. I stared down at the paperwork. Everything was in order. My name, my signature. And right beside the logbook sat a sealed white envelope. My chest went cold. Across the front, in black ink, were the same words I'd seen before. "Rules for surviving the night. Ridge 13. My hand shook as I tore it open. Same 9 rules. Same familiar handwriting. But the bottom, there was a 10th rule, written freshly, in darker ink, jagged letters slanting across the page. It was my handwriting. If the forest hums with your name, don't answer. You're already part of it. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, soft, almost human, whispering in tones I recognized. It was humming my name. And this time, I didn't dare on back.